Nobody can deny, right, that we are in a period of profound transition. We as individuals are going through a great transition, and so is our nation and the world as well. And the habits that kept us tethered to the certainty in the past, to our certainty, are gradually dissolving. And the activities, the busyness that kept us distracted from paying attention what was really going on in our lives, all that has stopped. And in this context, we are called to re-examine our mindsets, and in a way to peel back layers of patterns that kept us stagnated and prevented our growth. We are peeling back also layers of denial. And all this is uncomfortable, but we have to remember that before we crumble into despair, believing that it will always be this way, we need to ground ourselves and gain a little bit of perspective. So it would be wise to remember that we are in constant transitions. We don't notice it when transitions are not so abrupt as the transitions that we have been going on through this time. But it's good to remember that transitions are fluid and that they actually follow a very predictable stages. And there are 3 stages in these transitions. And the first stage is the letting go stage. That is really hard because we are separating from what was what was the norm, what was normal for us, right? And that which is old, that old is dying, and it brings a lot of grief to us. It brings heartache, and we suffer, and we cling to that we used to have, and we resist the change, which of course brings a lot of suffering and a lot of anxiety. And then there is a middle stage, which is called the liminal stage. That is like the in-between stage. Where we are no longer in the old, but we're not quite in the new. And I think that that's where we are now. And we feel ungrounded because we cannot attach to what we had, and we don't have anything we can attach to in the future still, because there is so much uncertainty. So we feel confused, we feel unsettled, perplexed, and a lot of anxiety may come with even panic attacks. But we need to also remember that because we are in constant change, this is also going to change. And there is going to be the last stage of the transition, which is the rebirth, which is the awakening. And in this case, I think it will be a big awakening, right? And a big rebirth, awakening into new habits at a personal level, at a national level, and at a world level, right? And we are also awakening to new mindsets, for which we need a little bit more flexibility. We need to be more open to the new. It's a very normal tendency, the human tendency to cling to the old, right? Because it's comfortable. But at this point, we know that something is going to change in the future. And we need to start training our hearts or training ourselves to open our hearts. So we will become, as we become more open to new beginnings, we have the blessing of new possibilities and new opportunities. So transitions are not all bad. We only have to remember to have a different perspective, right? Transitions are just part of life. They're always with us because transitions imply change. And life is change. Life is an adventure. It's a journey of exploration. And sooner or later, we realize that nobody leaves this experience, this life, unscathed. Nobody leaves this experience untouched by the challenges that transitions naturally bring. And some of those challenges for some people could be tragic and heartbreaking, but they are necessary nonetheless. Now, you might wonder, why are these transitions necessary, or these challenges? Because actually challenges improve our focus. In other words, when things are not going the way we planned, according to plan, our attention sharpens and questions arise. And in this enforced stillness, the activities of our lives, the constant busyness, which would distract us from what was really happening in our lives, well, all that is gone, right? So naturally, this provokes strong emotions in us. And if instead of reacting or ignoring or suppressing our emotions, we stay with the feelings that emerge, we may learn so much about ourselves and about the world. So transitions are inevitable, and how we respond to those transitions make a huge difference. Some of us may really crumble when things change, and we may spiral into episodes of panic attacks and extreme anxiety and depression and even anger, even rage, not realizing that we all have inner resources that we are born with, that we can cope with this, that we can use to cope with distress. In my experience of counseling students and clients, I realized that yes, we have those type of people, the ones that wilt and crumble, but then we have others who meet their challenges or adversities or even tragic events with self-confidence, and they do it gracefully and with aplomb, and they can recover much faster from anything that life throws at them. So the question is, what differentiates one group from the other? In fact, it's I don't really know for sure, but this is my observation. It's really hard to say because clearly we all have a unique personal history, and we come from complex backgrounds with different resources and even different temperaments, and that may play a role in the way we respond to challenges. However, I've noticed that there is one aspect that will actually determine whether the person weather the storms of life very well, and those who are consumed by the challenges of life. And that single aspect is their mental patterns, their habits of mind. We all have habits of mind. And these are habits of mind that we develop by repeating them day after day. You know, from getting up at the same time, or having a cup of coffee, or checking on the same news program. And just like that, we also develop thought patterns and habits of mind that have a profound impact on how we respond to the little things and the big things that happen to us in life. One of the most common mental patterns is rumination. We have like a mental movie playing on in our minds to which we cling to and we perpetuate by adding more and more details. So these are thoughts, and we add more and more thoughts, and it usually comes along with a narrative, a story of me in which, I am the main character and the people in my life are the rest of the cast, right? So this movie, the voice in your head, is your ego, is what we call your ego. So what is the ego? The ego is the story of us. It's the beliefs of who we think we are. It's the belief that we have been bringing along with us since we were very little children. And those of us who have been observing our thoughts for a while now know that our ego tells us stories, sometimes the same stories, all day long. And most of those stories come from fear, because the ego thinks that it is protecting us by keeping us in those familiar stories. If I can anticipate a story that is similar to my past, then the ego believes it keeps me safe. It keeps us safe, right? However, what begins to happen is that we start getting stuck in these very familiar stories, and these very familiar stories are not helpful. Especially, well, those of us who have experienced any type of trauma or abuse, the big T of trauma, like being raped or having had a terrible accident, or any type of abuse, emotional abuse, or being in a war zone, that's the big T of trauma. Or if you have experienced the small T of trauma, which is that chronic trauma that, coming to a home where there is constant nagging, or going to work to a place that you don't enjoy, that you feel that your job is not important, that you are not appreciated, and that you have a boss who's also complaining all the time. Something like that is the small trauma, chronic things that happen day after day. So those of us who have experienced any type of trauma will have the core belief that I am not worthy, that I am not good enough. We may even think I am broken. These ego stories or beliefs are the lens through which we view our entire experience. And we are stuck in them because we are bringing back our past beliefs, and we are recycling them into our present experience. Another typical story the ego tells us is that like a specific person or a specific group of people are doing better than I am doing. And so I'm comparing myself down, or I am behind in some way, in my career, in my relationships, in the fact that I don't have children, or if I have children, I don't have a good relationship with them. I am also in how successful or unsuccessful I am. Another common story is that no one likes me, or no one respects me, or that someone or everyone is more attractive than I am, or that I actually cannot do what other people do because I'm not good enough, right? So competitiveness and comparison is the voice of the ego. When we are feeling a threat, we go into us versus them. We go into me versus you mentality, where everyone else feels a threat to us. We start taking things personally. We feel offended. And so what we do is to try to actually maintain our sense of self and our sense of who we are by actually putting other people down so we can elevate. We can't find that sense of self when we criticize others, because then we become virtuous, right? And remember, last class we talked about virtuous righteousness. And we all do this. But what we need to understand is that those voices in our head that we get are just stories. These stories are not who we are. The stories you have in your head, the thoughts that you have, are not who you are. This is a habit that is easily strengthened, and it becomes a pattern. The thoughts we hold day after day will shape the quality of our lives because they will determine the way we face our difficulties. So the first step to create change is to identify that there is a distinction between these stories, these thoughts, and I. These stories are painful and they exist in my head, but they are not who I am. There is more to who I am, to who I actually am, more than those stories, right? More than those thoughts. So observing that there is a separation between my thoughts, and if I can observe my thoughts, then I am not my thoughts, right? Observing and noticing this distinction allows us to separate from these stories, from these thoughts, and understand that they are not true, and then respond and act in accordance to our highest conscious self. So the question is, how do we work with these disempowering thoughts that our ego creates? Well, if you have been attending these sessions, you have heard me say once and again that the first step is to become curious about our thinking habits, become aware of them, and to question them. You don't have to believe everything that pops up in your mind, every thought that comes to your mind. You can question those thoughts, and you don't have to question them in a you don't have to bully them, or you don't have to fight them. You can just question them, and not take everything they say as face value, right? Worry is another mental pattern that can lead to anxiety and even panic attacks. You know, Eckhart Tolle, the spiritual teacher, always says, worry pretends to be useful, but it is totally futile. Yes, it is totally useless. The hypothetical future scenarios we play in our mind, the only thing that those thoughts do is to deplete our energy. And then we get to the end of the day and we feel exhausted. And we wonder, well, maybe I didn't do so much work, but your brain has been recycling those thoughts and those worries. So worry only ruins our present moment without contributing an ounce to our future, to the future outcome. The truth is, we may not have much control over the challenges that we will face day after day, but we do have a lot of control over the habits of mind that we develop. So here I want to give you 4 mental patterns that we will all benefit from if we cultivate them. So the first mental pattern that we need to cultivate is to accept and to self-regulate your emotions. As long as you're in a fight with something, there is no resolution, right? First, we need acceptance of our thoughts and acceptance of our emotions. This is probably the key ingredient to a successful life. No matter how unpleasant, we need to understand an emotion is never bad. We need to accept our emotions as part of who we are, even when they are really uncomfortable. In transitions, certain emotions accompany each stage, as I said at the beginning. In the letting go stage, we experience vulnerability, a lot of fear, and a lot of grief. And in the in-between stage, we experience groundlessness, confusion, feeling unsettling experience. So emotion manifests themselves with physical symptoms, and that's why we call them feelings, right? Because we feel them in our body. And those symptoms are messengers of very useful information about what we need at the moment. So we need to listen to those symptoms. They are neurosomatic, they are a neurosomatic way in which our minds communicate with us. So what does that mean? Neurosomatic. Neuro comes from neurons. And we have neurons not only in our brain, we have neurons all over our body. We have neurons in our muscles, in our organs, in our tissues, in our bones. We have neurons everywhere. And those neurons allow us to communicate, to send messages to everywhere, from the body to our brain, and from our brain to our body. And I said we have to have a neurosomatic approach. And then, so neuro is because we have neurons everywhere. And somatic, soma means body in Greek. And just like when our body sends messages like, I feel hungry, or I feel thirsty, or I need to use the bathroom, I need to sleep, I am tired, we can also develop the capacity for interoception. And interoception means internal perception. The capacity, our capacity to sense the internal state of the body. So ignoring or repressing or avoiding our feelings can actually drive us to so much anxiety and panic attacks and also addiction. A lot of addicts started their addiction because they couldn't, they, they, they were holding, they were having emotions that were so uncomfortable that they didn't want to feel them anymore. And they looked for ways to find some relief. And they found that relief in alcohol or drugs or any type of substance. So when we accept our emotions, they always end up working for us instead of against us. Our emotions are so closely linked to our thought patterns. If we become curious and observe the way we feel, we will notice that usually a thought precedes an emotion. So we have a thought first, and then that thought creates an emotion, because when we think a thought, our brain perceives it as a reality, not just as a thought. So if that thought is distressful, the body reacts as if you were in real life going through the situation that you are envisaging in your mind. It's like when you go to the movies and you see a very romantic movie, you start crying. Sad movie, you start crying, because you, for your brain, for your nervous system, what you are living is a reality in that moment. So you have a thought first, and then after that thought there is an emotion, and that emotion is an energy emotion that that develops a symptom, a sensation in your body. And so you can connect with that sensation, you feel the message, and then you will know what you have to do next, because that message is full of, is very useful information about what you have to do. Step number 2 is to develop flexibility, that is to develop a flexible mind. Remember that life is in a constant flow, and what is true for you today may change in a few days. The questions you're posing today may bring certain answers, but those answers might change depending on how much we are growing in our understanding, in our life circumstances, in the new information that we are learning. And the more we grow, the deeper in our awareness we go, and the better understanding we have about things. So we need to nurture a certain degree of humility, humbleness, to accept that we do not know everything. We have to learn how to embrace the new and adjust our hierarchy of values and our hierarchy of priorities accordingly to the changes that are going outside ourselves and inside ourselves. Because a rigid mind leads to too much suffering. Step number 3 is to do these things, to accept the thoughts and emotions, to be able to accept them and not be at a war with them. We need to train our mind. And by now you know that meditation is the training of your mind to focus on one thing for a sustained period of time, and to disengage your mind from patterns of thoughts that your ego creates, and that are detrimental to your sense of calmness and balance. Think about this. From the moment we start school, when we are immersed in, we are very little, we are immersed in academics. And for the next 20 years, we learn mathematics, reading, writing, and other wonderful disciplines. But not one class is devoted to training our brain to have some control of our thoughts and our emotions. And meditation offers us that opportunity now. And the only requirement is consistency. That is, if you can do 5 minutes a day, do 5 minutes a day, but consistently do it every day until 5 minutes will become very short, and you will want, because you will start seeing some improvement, you will want to do it a little bit more, and then a little bit more. And then that voice in your head starts decreasing. And you can actually, as time goes by, you can actually experience like a little silence that is called a gap between the thoughts, where you are actually not thinking at all. And we all can do that with practice. And then you will get to a point in which most of your meditations will be like that. And there will be days in which you will have a very active mind, and that's very normal. But that's why we meditate, to train our mind to stay. So then we bring that training to our life, to our daily lives. And when there is something that is not going according to plan, we are already trained that instead of reacting, we can just respond. Stay, take a pause, breathe in, breathe out, and respond from a higher self, from a higher consciousness. And the fourth step is cultivate gentleness. Learn to be gentle with yourself when you make a mistake, even when you fail, because if we do not crumble when we fail, we can learn, since failure may contain the seeds of success. Now, if we're only focused on doing and serving others and doing and serving, we will reach a point of burnout. If we're only focused on our inner work, we may become self-absorbed and completely out of touch with what is happening around us. So we need to work on ourselves so we can be our own person and not just filling a role and fitting in, which is what we learned to do as children. Working on ourselves helps us know what is wrong for me and what is right for me. And in that way, we can recenter our journey. If we avoid that, or we ignore that, our life may become very confusing, very chaotic. We don't know what to do. So we work with ourselves first so we can heal first. And we heal so we can serve others. And we serve others as part of our own healing. So to finish, I would like to share a mantra I learned from one of my favorite writers, and he's a famous Jungian psychotherapist and professor, and the former president of the Jungian Society in the US, and his name is James Hollis. He's been writing for a long time. Today is his birthday. He's turning 80 years old. And Dr. Hollis says he has such a bright mind. He says he lives in a 4-story condominium, and every day he takes an elevator 6 floors down to go outside, or when he could drive his car before the pandemic, to the garage. And then in the elevator, he says this 6-word mantra. And this is him talking to himself, right? So the 6 words are shut up, suit up, and show up. And so he says that shut up is for him a reminder that he has to stop complaining, stop whining. And he says, my problems are small in the great scheme of things, right? Because of course there are people out there who don't have any food today or any place to live. There are people who are actually suffering. So he says to himself, you are fine, so just shut up. And then the second one is suit up, just like get ready, prepare, do your homework, demand something from you, pay your dues. Do not expect it to be easy. Do not expect others to do your work. Do what you need to do to be ready to take it on. And then the last one is show up. And he says, it's like, do your best. Do the best you can. Show yourself into what you're doing. It is about the authenticity of your investment in this wonderful journey, and get it done. So they are again, shut up, suit up, and show up. And I would like to read to you this quote that is from him here. So he says why he is actually saying this mantra. He says, just like the reassuring quote by Samuel Beckett says, fail? It doesn't matter, try again, fail better. Sometimes all we can do is fail better, like Samuel Beckett said. It means that you have taken this life seriously, that you have taken your responsibilities and your freedoms seriously, and you are doing the best you can. And what you do is also lifting the burden off of other people that somehow may have to pay for our unlived lives. We may never be able to figure it out entirely, but this is a grand and glorious journey and a great mystery. And the more we throw ourselves into it, the more rewarding it is. And that is great to share with other people. And with that, with those wise words, I would like to finish this talk, hoping that it has been of value to you, and that you can benefit from these tools. So now we are going to do a meditation so we can practice these tips. And I'm going to drink some water. Too much talking. So the meditation we're going to do is an adaptation of a very simple practice that I learned from Thich Nhat Hanh, who is the Vietnamese monk who's 80, I think he's 84 years old now, and he had a stroke 4 years ago, and he cannot speak anymore, but he has left a legacy that is so rich. And many years ago, I read a book by him that was really wonderful. I've read a lot of books by him, but this one is called Living Buddha, Living Christ. And in there, he shares a very simple practice that I practiced in my life so much until it became like second nature. So I would like to lead you in this meditation so you can have it as a template, and you can do it not only while you are in meditation, but you can do it in any moment in your life. You can have this relationship with your emotions and with your thoughts.